Hey guys, what is up and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we are going to be taking a look at some rendering improvements, some up and coming features, and some very exciting news coming out about Yuzu, this Nintendo Switch emulator. So here in Moon Kingdom, you can see that on the ground, they have now completely fixed the texturing of the craters, and they have also completely fixed Mario's footsteps in pretty much every kingdom in which they occur. Now, another very cool thing that they have added to this emulator is the ability to switch between docked and portable mode on the fly. To do this, all you need to do is come to emulation, configure, and you can simply turn off enable docked mode, hit OK, and as you can see, our visual quality has been degraded down to the quality that you could expect from the portable game mode. Doing this also allows us to test what our performance is going to be like when switching between docked and portable mode, so let's do that right now in the most demanding area. So as you can see, we're about 42 to 45 frames per second, pretty much the lowest I'm going to see in this kingdom. Coming back to configure, and I'm going to turn on docked mode, give it a few seconds because it does actually have a bit of delay between when you turn it on, and you can see that at least for me, using my CPU and GPU, I am not seeing any difference in performance between using these two different modes. Now, in the past 2 or 3 days since I have released a video, there has been a fairly substantial performance uplift, at least, in Super Mario Odyssey on this Switch emulator. So as a lot of you would have seen, when they fixed the distance rendering problem where pretty much nothing outside of a certain distance would be rendered, we got a fairly substantial performance drop of around 15 to 20 frames per second. Thankfully, as of right now, they have fixed that performance drop and we are basically back to the same kind of performance numbers we were seeing before that fix was applied. Moving across into Metro Kingdom, it is another area where I want to test the performance difference between docked and the portable mode in this Switch emulator itself. So all we want to do is come over to this ledge, and I'm just going to turn Mario around so we can actually see the detail on his face and on his eyes. Next, come to emulation, configure, and then we're going to disable the docked mode. Now, as you can see, visuals wise at least, it is pretty much a night and day experience between the two different modes. You can clearly tell that it is a fairly substantially lower resolution being used in this portable mode. You can also pretty much see that even though we have taken a fairly significant drop in visual fidelity, we are not really seeing any performance difference between these two different modes. We're generally in and around 28 to 30 FPS in this, the most demanding area in Super Mario Odyssey, so you are going to have to test on your own computer. If you are getting any kind of performance differences between docked and portable mode, it's quite easy to do so now that you can switch between them on the fly while in game. Moving back to our old faithful Sand Kingdom area, we can see once again that as with Moon Kingdom, they have completely fixed the rendering of Mario's footsteps in this area. However, the most substantial visual upgrade in this area is when we move down into the oasis. You can now see that they have fixed the flickering on these plants. They have also fixed the fact that some of the plants, I believe it's the ones that give you the coins, have now got their proper textures being rendered instead of just black squares. And we have seen a very big improvement to the way that water is being rendered. You can see these improvements not only here in Sand, but in pretty much any kingdom that contains water, for example Snow Kingdom, Lake Kingdom, or Seaside Kingdom. Now, as I said, we have seen a very substantial performance increase in at least the last 2 days. Anyone who would have checked out my previous video where in this area I was generally running at around 32 to 35 frames per second, it has now jumped back up to the numbers we were seeing before they fixed any of the rendering bugs. In previous Yuzu Canary builds, we would have seen that when looking down towards the town, we would drop down to around 24 or 25 FPS. So let's just run down here quickly and check out what our performance is like in the very center of the town. So you're going to see that when you approach the town, it is going to drop down But once you have cached any of your shaders in this area, you will see that we are going to jump straight back up into the mid to high 40s. So coming into this square, we would previously drop down to around 27 or 28 frames per second, whereas now you can see we are in the mid to high 40s. This basically brings us back to the performance level we were seeing in this kingdom when pretty much nothing was being rendered. So it is absolutely awesome to see our frame rates growing and our render quality also getting much better. Now obviously we're still going to have bugs, like you can see these flickering textures on this chain link fence, and you're also going to see some fairly weird bloom effects, I think they are. You will see them mostly when you look up to the inverted pyramid. You can see that the outline kind of has this weird blur around it, and if I look up to my left and into the distance, you will also see that the same issue is affecting this floating pedestal. Now we also in pretty much every single kingdom still have this weird issue where we get this, I guess you would call it a fisheye lens effect. I don't believe it is anything related to a fisheye effect. It is apparently something to do with texture or resolution culling, but the developers are working on it as of right now, and hopefully it's going to be fixed very soon. Okay, so let's take a look at something that I know a lot of you guys out there are going to be excited for. Let's take a look at a new upcoming feature in Yuzu Emulator. To showcase this feature, we're back here in Sand Kingdom, and you should see in the top of my window that this is a different build. Now, when I come to 2 players, press A to start in 2-player mode, you are going to see that with my first pad, I am able to control Mario, and when using my second pad, I am able to control Cappy, meaning that we are soon going to be getting a multiplayer support in Yuzu Emulator, just like we have on the Nintendo Switch. Now, for me at least, this is pretty big news, especially when you consider the fact that if you use this new 2-player mode, and it's not in fact limited to 2 players, you are going to be able to map up to 8 players in any of your games that support them. And if you use this new mode in combination with an application like, for example, Parsec, you are going to be able to play online in co-op with any of your friends anywhere in the world. So this new PR, which is called Better HID2, is going to be coming to your Canary builds very soon. The next thing we are going to test out is how exactly it works in a game like ARMS. Now, as you can see in the main menu of ARMS, since we have got fonts merged, they are slightly working, but some of the fonts are not correctly being rendered. So when we come into character select, you can indeed once again see that we have 2 players being selected, and when we move between these different characters, you can see that the game does get a small bit of shader cache stutter when you swap between everything for the first time, but once it settles, you generally get fairly good performance. So I now want to test a very performance demanding area. Scrapyard should be a very good one to test, as it generally gives the worst performance. So here we are in game. You can see that on my left I have my player 1, and on my right I have my player 2. So let's just ready up with both of these pads, as I'm going to be controlling both of these characters myself just to test out this PR. So once we get in game, you can see performance wise, even though it's rendering 2 screens, we are getting around 45 to 50 frames per second. This is actually very good performance, and more, to be honest, than I expected when you consider the fact that I am basically rendering 2 times the amount of stuff I normally would be. Now, generally in the single player mode, where I'm only rendering 1 character and 1 screen at a time, I am pretty much locked to 59 or 60 frames per second in ARMS, at least once you have fully compiled all of your shaders into your GPU driver. Now, unfortunately, we still don't have any form of disk-based caching in Yuzu Emulator. Hopefully, we will either see performance and optimization improvements to a point where we no longer need disk-based caches, or we will see disk-based caches added to this emulator for our use. So the final part of this video is going to be covering something that is really exciting, and from a performance and usability perspective could spell one of the biggest improvements in this emulator we have ever seen. Now, over on the Yuzu Discord, where pretty much all of the news about this emulator comes from, we have basically been getting small snippets of news and developers basically saying there's something very big coming very soon. Now, in the past few days, we were given a screenshot. I'm going to put it on screen right now, and if you look in the top of this window, you can indeed see that this is a work in progress Vulcan API version of Yuzu Emulator. So after we got shown this picture, it was pretty much confirmed 100% that several developers in the Yuzu development team are currently working on a Vulkan API implementation for this Nintendo Switch emulator. Now, when we take a look at what Vulkan has done for other emulators, for example, if we look at RPCS3, the PlayStation 3 emulator, this is another example of an emulator that previously had an OpenGL backend, and when they added Vulkan, it gave massive performance and shader compilation improvements to pretty much every single game. So to go back to the very start of Vulkan's implementation on RPCS3, we are more than likely going to see a very similar circumstance to what's going to happen when it gets implemented in Yuzu. You can pretty much guarantee that there's going to be an absolute buttload of bugs. There's going to be games that are currently booting in Yuzu right now not working with Vulkan, but hopefully with a little bit of hard work from the developers and a lot of patience from us, the emulator's user base, they will be able to give us a very impressive and very usable graphics API. So as I said in my last video about Yuzu, I am currently working on an updated compatibility list for all of your most popular and requested games. If there's any games you want to see me test in this compatibility guide, let me know down in the comment section below, and if I have access to that game, I will include it in my compatibility guide. As I always say guys, if you want to help with the development of this Switch emulator, you can find a link to their Patreon fund down in the description of this video, so head on over there and pledge your support if you want to see this emulator grow. Once again guys, cheers for checking out this video. Remember to like it if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't, and as always, subscribe to the channel if you want to see all future videos from me.